some other benefits too, but the major ones. But let's look down here at the negatives. Based upon their work in replicated trial environments, they're seeing reduced yields with 15-inch rows also. An average yield loss of 10 to 15% with a range of 0 to 25% yield loss from 15 down to 7.5 was their benchmark. One of the challenges that I've got is this last one. It says more weed pressure, question mark. I know a lot of the producers that I work with that have higher weed pressure, the guys, and even within the trials that we've done, even though we've been controlling weeds effectively with herbicides, when you get out to 10 and 12 and 15-inch rows, especially for you guys that have got resistant ryegrass, I think you're asking for more trouble going out to 15-inch rows. We see a lot less weeds in a lot of crops when you get down to 5, 6, 7.5, and 10-inch rows compared to 15-inch. It's even more common in soybean fields in the US. There are a lot of producers that have a 7.5-inch air seeder for their wheat that they plant soybeans with. They've got a corn planter or a soybean planter set up on 15-inch or 30-inch rows that they also plant soybeans with. And for logistical reasons, there's a lot of guys that will be in the same paddock with an air seeder, seeding beans on 7.5-inch rows as they will with a planter on 15s. And obviously, a lot of these fields are split half-half. And there's a lot of guys that will instantly tell you that they have to go back and spray the field an additional time with an in-season herbicide when the beans are planted on 15-inch rows compared to the 7.5s, which canopy a lot faster. So just some ideas for you. But I want you guys to prove me wrong on this. A lot of you guys with RTK, you've got the ability to go back in there and split the middle. So set your seeding rate on 50%, plant some strips, and just tell me if I'm wrong. I hope I am. This is some work out of Queensland. You can Google row spacing Australia, and this was a data set I brought up the other day. And this is actually some good work in pretty dry conditions. What they actually did is I think they had 24 row spacing side-by-side comparisons and actually bracketed out this work into different yield levels. Less than 2.5 ton per hectare yields, 2.5 to 3.5 ton per hectare yields, and greater than 3.5. And you need to Google this, look it up, and read the whole research paper. But the conclusion from this particular work is here at the bottom. It says from 24 on-farm and small plot trials, when yield is above 3.5 tons per hectare, losses from wider rows greater than 10-inch will be the greatest. So that was, and this, if you start looking into the data, they're looking about 9 or 10% yield loss going from 7.5 to 10-inch rows. Okay, so I think most of the work that I've seen, the trials I've conducted, the data sets I've seen, you're looking at probably 10% yield loss. And again, if there was a micronutrient or a fertilizer that gave you 10%, I think you'd be all over it. Okay? Got about 20 more minutes. So let's continue on with where seeding is, where seeding's going, where seeding probably needs to go. So we talked about these wide sections, huge 10, 12, 15-foot frame sections with very little terrain following abilities earlier on. We then started moving towards these paralink type openers that had a parallel linkage of some kind that gave you the ability to follow the contours of the ground, which is obviously a step forward. A lot of them, however, especially when operated at higher forward speeds, caused a huge amount of soil throw and a lot of soil disturbance. The other challenge in certain environments is it gave you a lot of challenges getting seeds pressed into moisture. And I'm going to suggest that one of the principal limitations of a lot of the hoe drills, even with parallel linkage mechanisms, is if you've got marginal moisture and you're going into a field with a hoe drill such as this, and loose, dry soil from the top falls in on top of the seed, and then you press dry soil down on top of the seed, you're not going to get very good emergence. Okay? We see that a lot in marginal areas such as Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma. Your other challenge, and this isn't the best example, but it sure illustrates a point. This is a field of wheat stubble that was obviously burnt, as you can see. He's on, I think this was 8-inch centers. It might have been 10, but he was running fast enough in which the back rank of openers at seeding time were obviously throwing soil on top of the front rank and burying the front rank. So a lot of it just goes back to setting up your seeder. Everybody knows that. I'm going to suggest that the poorest seeder that's well maintained, well operated, will probably outperform the best, newest, greatest, latest technology on the market if it's not set up properly. But obviously you need to be mindful of forward speed, especially with a lot of the hoe drills. I know the big seed hook machines in the States, the Bourgault 3310s, they're extremely speed sensitive. If you get above 7, 8, 9, 10K, you've got a lot of soil throw and a lot of inconsistencies in seeding depth. Okay? In fact, a lot of the dealers and manufacturers in the States will recommend forward speeds of a maximum of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10K at the fastest. Okay? So about 10 or 12 years ago, this is one of the first single discs that I saw in the States. Saw in this country. This was up at Parks or Forbes, if I remember correct. And we had an in-field training event. We've got another one of these on Monday with a Canfor group. For anybody that's interested in learning a little bit more about what we do in these field training sessions. But basically, this is one of the first John Deere single discs I'd seen in this country and most people had seen in this country. And what we're doing here is we're just going into a paddock, marginal moisture, and basically laying a stream of seeds at a consistent seeding depth. Obviously, as long as you've got adequate down pressure, and sometimes you may need weights, depending on the soils and the hardness of the ground and the thickness of the residue. You may need weights to achieve enough down pressure to push the disc into the ground. But as long as you've got that gauge wheel pushed down firmly against the soil surface, you're going to get consistent depth control. Okay? Anybody know who Francis Childs is? Anybody know who the late Francis Childs is? He passed away. Who's Francis Childs? Anybody remember the name Francis Childs? Francis Childs is the individual that holds the world record corn yield. He produced about 5, 6, 7 years ago, somewhere in that time frame, independently adjusted and verified by extension university personnel. I believe it was 657 bushels per acre, which is like 16 ton a hectare on a 4-hectare block. And I think you had to cut 2 4-hectare blocks to qualify. But he did seminars. He did meetings where he gathered growers up, similar to grower groups like this. And one of the most important things he said that helped him more than anything, and he passed away not long back, like I say, but one of the most important things he said that increased his yields more than anything was seedling depth consistency. Getting all of the seeds, his corn seeds, out of the ground so they all came up at the same time. They wasn't competing one another, one bigger than the other, etc. So I guess from my experience, the single disc machines offer a huge advantage over the hoe drills, even the Paralink machines, from a point of view of being able to position seeds consistently into the soil. Okay? Obviously, it comes at the cost or the ability to spread residue. Again, if you can't spread residue evenly, and we've talked about that for an extensive amount of time, you're not going to be happy with the performance of a disc. But in my opinion, the discs are the way to go. Okay? This grower ended up buying this disc, his neighbors ended up buying this disc, and there's a whole slew of disc machines in this particular area now. So Case obviously offers another similar concept of disc machine. It's still a radial arm design, meaning the whole opener is suspended by a single pivot point at the front, which may or may not be good for you. If your paddocks are almost flat, a radial arm design such as the SDX Case, such as the John Deere 1890, whatever, are going to work fine for you. If you're in a controlled traffic situation and you've got depressions where your controlled traffic tracks are, you may not see enough ability for the unit to descend down, and it may take some aftermarket modifications. So parallel linkage single disc openers are obviously the future. The only weakness with the single discs, the John Deere and the